Welcome to episode 2. Really episode 3. But episode 2, because the last one was deleted accidentally, of Rolling Conversations.
Sorry, Derek. So, does Jiu-Jitsu make you crazy or does it cure crazy? Well, today we're going to find out, and we're actually bringing a professional on board, Dr. Robert Blessin, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, former Marine, doctor. What hasn't this guy done? But he's going to help us today talking about Jiu-Jitsu. Does it make you crazy or does it cure you?
Because of the internet and the way that things sort of like happened, down the road. And so then it's like some of them say 1984 is where millennials, and that's where Alicia's always like, my sister Alicia is 84. She's like, I'm not a millennial.
Is it like Van Halen with David Lee Roth and Van Halen afterwards?
Yeah.
Divides
Van Hagar.
Yeah.
Yeah, Van
And then
Hagar.
there's a lot of millennials that don't want me, so they're like, you're definitely not one.
Yeah.
So we're recording.
Oh, this whole we have been?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Nice. So, Bobby, thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And if you want, real quick, just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and get going into it.
Yeah, so my name's Bobby, or Robert Blessin. My friends call me Bobby. That's why you guys call me Bobby.
Yes, we're friends.
Absolutely. I'm from Western Massachusetts, so kind of like a rural area in Massachusetts. Like you don't think of like Massachusetts as like having kind of country areas, but it does. And I'm from like the New York, Massachusetts border, so I kind of like grew up like hunting and not like a redneck, but more like kind of a redneck lifestyle than like what you imagine, like, living in Boston, kind of city life. So
You don't think of redneck in New England. You don't think of those two, the geographic locations.
I have to say I've learned something new because I would not have expected you to say this at all.
yeah. It's like a population of like people who support gay marriage and gun rights. It's like a very weird like population of people, like avid hunters who support gay marriage.
Very, very diverse. What you're saying?
Yeah, but it's just like kind of classic, kind of I think American upbringing. Yeah, I'm still like an avid deer hunter. Grew up deer hunting, and then started jiu-jitsu. Well, actually started wrestling when I was 17. Only did a year of that, and then started jiu-jitsu. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And where did you start jiu-jitsu at?
I started at a place. It was actually like an Okinawan karate school, but it was affiliated with Hoist Gracie, and we actually would have like Rob Kahn always come up and do seminars.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It's kind of a funny thing. Like now, right near Gracie, Tampa, and.
Yeah.
I was always like aware of those guys. So I started jiu-jitsu when I was 18 and then stopped for like a year because I went off to the Marine Corps. And then when I came back from training, training with the Marine Corps, started training jiu-jitsu again. I've been doing it like pretty much consistently for the past 14 years.
Nice. How long were you in the Marines?
6 years.
6 years, man. Thanks for your service.
Thank you.
Wow. And what'd you do after the Marine Corps?
So
we have to talk about your profession also.
Yeah. So I did 2 years active in the Marine Corps. I was actually an infantryman, and I joined like right in the middle of Iraq. Like 2009, I enlisted, and that's when like Iraq and Afghanistan were like both going on. It was towards the tail end of Iraq, and then Afghanistan was this whole 20-year adventure, if you want to call it that. So I went to Parris Island, which is Marine Corps boot camp, in July of 2009. It was just this very, very intense atmosphere, especially if you were infantry, because it's like all your drill instructors had just come back from really bad deployments in Iraq, and you were getting ready to go over. So it was just a very like kind of intense time in the Marine. Like the Marine Corps is always intense, but particularly that time. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I know I have some family members that were in the service, in the Marines specifically, and they tell some pretty crazy stories about boot camp and the gas chambers and different stuff like that.
Oh
you know?
yeah. Yeah, I got stories for days about it. Like it's like everything people think it is plus more.
I was gonna say, and then some.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, it's like they say, they don't promise you a rose garden, and but it's good.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, kind of. I feel like made me who I am today.
Nice. So you did 2 years active, 4 years reserve.
Yeah, but the reserve, you're still like pretty active because it's 4 or 5 days a month you're training, and you're always kind of doing thing for the reserve unit, and then. Like every summer we'd go somewhere in the world. So like one summer I went to Africa, one summer I went to Norway, one summer I went to like the desert in California, like 29 Palms, the hottest place on earth. And there's just always like crazy stuff going on.
Nice.
And the unit I actually joined, it was 2nd Battalion, 25th Marines. When I joined them in January 2010, after I got done with all my training, just as like a basic infantryman, they had just come back from like a really bad deployment in Iraq where, a few of them have gotten killed. So it was kind of like, you're the new guy in this Marine unit, and you're like, hi guys, I'm part of you guys now, and they're like, no, not really.
Yeah.
Then you decide after the Marines or during the Marines that you're going to go to school.
Yeah, so I never did good in school. I've had a learning disorder my whole life. Like, if you asked people in high school who's going to become a doctor, like they never would have thought me. Like, I graduated high school at like a 9th grade math level. I could only go to community college, so because I didn't have the grade for college, so. Went to community college for 2 years, started learning about science, like really fell in love with science, and then like my love of science turned me on to medicine. But throughout the whole time, people were like, oh, you're at community college. People who go to community college don't become doctors. So there is a lot of kind of like ignoring what people were telling me, like you can't do this, or you're not the type of person who gets into med school. Like looking back on it, like a lot of the journey was about like just ignoring the naysayers.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then so you go to med school and you're a doctor. What's your practice like? What are you practicing now?
So I started med school in New York in 2014. Did 4 years of med school. Finished med school in 2018, and then I wanted to do psychiatry, but I did a year of medicine first in residency. So I did a year of internal medicine residency, and then 3 years of psychiatry residency. And when you get board certified in psychiatry, like after you take a test after residency, you get board certified by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. So they like kind of overlap a lot. And like my specific area of interest is like dementias, memory disorders. But right now I work at Winter Haven Hospital, both in the emergency department, and they have an inpatient psychiatric unit where every week it's 15 different people with, it can be like many different complaints, like people that go psychotic from drug use, people who are depressed and want to hurt themselves, people who have dementia. It's just really like everything you can imagine. So I really enjoy it, but it's kind of a crazy world.
it definitely is a crazy world. So you started jiu-jitsu at 18 or 17ish, and then you enlist in the Marines, and then you go to school, and along the way you're having people tell you you can't do it. I'm sure there was a lot more of that, a lot more of, and I've always found this, and you hear people talk about this a lot, is like, if you tell somebody an idea, like, hey, I've got this idea, like, this is what I want to do, and that person tells you, like you're crazy, it's not going to work or whatever, like, and you hear it all the time, and people are very bad about it, and I'm bad about this myself, is like they'll say like that's stupid, or that's a waste of time, or good luck with that. You know what I mean? Like, and you know, you shouldn't be surrounding yourself by people like that, whether it's choice or whether it's at a job, you're working at a job and you're like, man, one day I'm going to do this. You can't help but be around people if you need employment and things like that. But do you feel going into, you know, you'd only done jiu-jitsu for like a year before you went into boot camp. Do you feel it helped you any going into it, or had it not been really training enough back then to kind of reap the benefits of it?
That's a good question. I think it helped me because, like, I was never good at sports. Like, no one ever accused me of being athletic. I'm a very non-natural athlete. I think it helped me, like, in that it exposed me to sports more. You know, like, I played baseball, but, you know, I was never good, and I never got tested, like, really physically. You know, wrestling tested me physically. I was never really good at it, though. So I think the main thing that jiu-jitsu did was, like, get me used to, like, intense exercise before the Marine Corps.
Nice.
Yeah.
At what point during all of this did you have time to also learn Portuguese? Like that, there's great stuff happening in this conversation, but I have tried learning Portuguese. You seemed very busy, and you still learned it. And I'm not busy, and I can't learn it.
Yeah. So I went to Brazil. This is a whole crazy story. I met a girl.
It's always a girl.
It's always a girl.
Always a girl.
It's always a girl. In 2013, started dating her, and she was like the aunt of the ex-vice president of Brazil. So they were like very well off in Brazil. So I spent some time there, and like by that time I was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, training like pretty much every day. So it was just like anything else. I just started, learning a little Portuguese. It definitely didn't come like naturally, but I think one thing I've learned in my life is, I was talking about this with Andrew yesterday, is like just how consistency compounds. Like if you do a little bit every day, it's amazing what you can accomplish over months or over years. Just being very like diligent about just doing something every day. Whether it's working out, I'm gonna work out 45 minutes a day. I'm gonna practice this language, 30 minutes a day. It's like, people overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 month, but I think they underestimate what they can accomplish in a year by just doing something every day. And I've always just kind of understood that. I'm a very plan, deliberate person. So I plan my days. I stick to a schedule. Like I think I just understand like the value of good time management.
No.
And not wasting my time.
Someone else could benefit from it.
I'm more of a fly by the seat of my pants, and I want to be better. I tell him all the time, I would love, my best weeks are whenever I do sit on Sunday and I plan things out of what I'm going to do, and I buy food for us for the week, and I know I'm going to be able to train on these days, and I'm going to do my, printing for this on these days. And then I don't know what happens the week after that, and then it's back to just flying by the seat of my pants.
Yeah.
But I agree. Like, there's so much benefit and structure. I don't know. I'm a big blob of goo with no structure.
There's something to be said for... I just finished a book on Einstein, and he was like that. Like, Einstein, when he went...
I'm being compared to Einstein.
Hey, he got his PhD in physics. None of his professors would write him a letter of recommendation. He was not on time for class. He was kind of a misfit. Didn't necessarily follow the crowd. I don't think he planned out his days. There's this picture from the day he died of his office, and it's just the best.
We have similar hair. So.
Similar hair. So it's just different personalities.
Yeah.
I function very well on a structured day.
Okay.
Like that's like it. My best days are like whenever I'm structured. It's not that I write everything down in detailed, but like I know what I'm doing tomorrow. Like I'm thinking my day out, like I'm thinking the day after that out, and it's like, and it's not like where I set alarms like, okay, this is, you know, I'm working on this project for 30 minutes or whatever, but I found like I do succeed or I'm more productive like whenever I say, okay, I'm going to devote an hour to this, however long I can get done in an hour, like this is what I'm doing for this hour. And it's like, no matter what, if I say at 12 o'clock, it's lunchtime, I'm going to go do this for an hour, 12 o'clock, I stop, I go and do it, and I come back in and get back to whatever I'm doing. Those are the days where I feel the best. I train the best. I like everything just flows better for me, like that. You know, you know what I mean. But since we got a professional on, we wanted to talk about the health benefits of training jiu-jitsu, both physical and mental.
Sure.
Like, so if you, like, I know how I feel physically and mentally after working out, regardless of the workout. I find I don't get the same feeling after like a lifting session, but I definitely feel like, I definitely feel better. But mentally, for me, after a good training session of jiu-jitsu, like, I almost feel like a deflated balloon. I feel so relaxed. I feel calm. Everything's like no bubbles, no troubles. Like I'm just like, okay, let's go. You know? So if you want to kind of give us, you know, your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so they're kind of two different things, but kind of the same thing. Like the psychological versus, like you'd call it like physiological, like benefits of jiu-jitsu and just exercise in general. Every study, like pretty much ever done, like shows that exercise is, if you want to make a beneficial intervention in someone's life, and it doesn't matter if it's health problems, mental health problems, and of course there's some mental health problems where exercise is not sufficient to cure it, you know, but it can pretty much make any psychological or physiologic problem better. Exercise lowers your heart rate, or excuse me, it lowers your blood pressure. It lowers your cholesterol. It lowers your blood sugar. It promotes weight loss. It's protective against dementia. Like if you could put all, Joe Rogan said this about the psychological benefits of jiu-jitsu, but if you could put all the physiological benefits of not only jiu-jitsu, but pretty much any intense workout into a pill, it'd be the best-selling pill in the world and would probably do more for people than any pill.
Yeah.
It's that helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is that release? Is it dopamine after we get done training? Like what, because it definitely, I mean, as much as the physical exhaustion, like I love grinds. I mean, like if I'm working out, I'm not built for running. I'm not a sprinter. Like nothing moves fast on me, but I love, like some of my favorite workouts, like if I'm lifting, like I'll put a weight vest on, I'll do farmer carries, like I'll like do slow, heavy grinds, pressure grinds. And whenever I roll, like you and I roll, like I'm not fast and explosive. Like the more pressure you give me, the more it's like, okay, let's see what you got. Like I like that pressure.
Yeah.
But the feeling I get after I have a good training session like that is, it's not, I mean, it's physical, but just the mental, like what is that release?
So I think, when you exercise, your body releases pain-killing proteins or hormones called endorphins, and they actually work at the level of the spinal cord, and they stop pain transmission actually from your spinal cord to your brain, but they also work at the level of your brain, and as you say, endorphins actually promote, endorphins are basically synthetic opioids. Like they're if you look at like their chemical structure, they're actually very similar to like heroin, and this is how like forms of heroin like morphine actually block pain and cause euphoria. So it's your body for some reason releases endorphins as like pain killing like neurotransmitters while you exercise, and then one of the side effects of endorphin release in your body is euphoria. So it's like the much of what you're feeling, I think, is the result of those endorphins being released, which in your brain causes dopamine release, which it's a little simple to think like dopamine causes happiness. Like it's not quite that simple, but it does like kind of cause reward, like makes you want to do what you just did. The other thing is there are muscle relaxers that you can give to people that they can't even enter the brain, but just by virtue of relaxing the muscles in the body, people will feel much less anxious and stressed. And it's part of why we feel anxiety is if your brain is monitoring your body, and if you're holding yourself in tense positions, your brain actually is like, are they tense right now? And that's much of where anxiety comes from. I think exercise promotes like muscle relaxation. So it's your body is more relaxed. So then your brain is taking kind of notice of how your body is positioned and how tense you are. And it's saying, oh, we're more relaxed. We can feel better now. We often think of like, if I'm anxiety causes muscle tension, but it's also muscle tension can cause anxiety. It's like kind of bi-directional.
And you cannot have muscle tension after however many rounds at the end of class.
Right.
Because I know on the days that he, like, there'll be days that I have so much going on, and I'm not in a position to stop what I'm doing to go train. Mm-hmm. And then, but he can see that I'm like, I have reached the limit in my head of like patience and like desire to stand in there and like do what I'm doing. And he's like, you always feel better after class. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, but if I stop, I have to restart. And then, every single time we're in the truck on the way home and I'm like this, I needed that.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yes.
Every single time. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny because I kind of knew, like, okay, it's dopamine, like you feel good, you hear it all the time, but I didn't know, like, the whole anxiety, muscle tension, anxiety, things like that. But, and I know you get that from any kind of working out, any kind of strenuous activity and things like that. But what is it specifically like? What do you think it is specifically about jiu-jitsu that helps relieve like that stress, that anxiety? And then there's a second part to that question, but I want you to kind of like your thoughts on like jiu-jitsu specifically, how it releases that anxiety. You know what I mean?
I think it's because, even now, like I've been doing jiu-jitsu 14 years, and even if I'm just rolling with white belts or blue belts, I leave that gym exhausted. Like like the exercise with jiu-jitsu is always intense, where you can lift weights, and if you're not really feeling it, like you can
go through the motions.
Exactly. Like it's actual intense physical exercise, and I think there's a big difference between like physical exercise and intense physical exercise. Like God forbid, like I roll with you or like Jake, and then it's like, I'm like hyperventilating after 5. Like I'm just like ready to die.
Or when I'm rolling with, and any of you.
Yeah. You're just like even after 14 years, like every day I leave the gym like, oh my God, like, So I think it's the intensity.
Is it? Okay. And then I know like the one thing that I like about it is, I've been doing this a long time. You've been doing this a long time. Mm-hmm. And, you coach, I coach. When we're rolling, we're able to concentrate on what's going on, but we're also able to keep an eye to make sure, like, it's not that we're watching other people rolling and we're not paying attention to what we're doing, but it's in our peripheral.
Right.
Like you're seeing, like if you see a sudden movement that's like, oh, that's not a normal movement, like you'll look over to make sure somebody's okay, or you'll hear a sound and you're like, what was that? I know we've been rolling before and we've heard sounds and we're like, wait a minute, whoa, that's not a normal sound.
Sure.
But aside from that, like I can be doing arm curls and I'll lose count of what reps I'm on because I'm thinking about something else.
Yes.
In jiu-jitsu, I'm never, if you're not focused on the task at hand, unless you're just rolling with a kid or a brand new person and you're just kind of going through the motions or whatever, or you're drilling with a new person, like, because even drilling with you and I drill a lot, and we're never, we always have interesting conversations on the mat. But when we're drilling, we're always talking about, hey, I feel like this, or it's always like on what we're doing. And that's what I've noticed about jiu-jitsu versus other forms of exercise, is like you really can't think about other things when you're rolling. You know, especially in the beginning, the white belt, the blue belt phase and things like that, like you're going, oh my God, what's happening to me? I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. So I love that about jiu-jitsu, is like it clears your mind. So whatever stress is going on, whatever's in your day, like whatever stress is going on in your day, like it's not that it takes it away. It doesn't make problems go away. It's just that it helps you forget about it for a minute. And then you realize, like, I know for me, sometimes I get buried in stress, anxiety, whatever, you know, normal life problems. And then when you sit there and you fester about it and you're thinking about, like, man, bills, wife, kids, job, life, the boss is a jerk, whatever, you go to jiu-jitsu, all that shit's still there. But when you're rolling, you don't think about it. You're like, I'm here. I'm trying not to get strangled. I'm trying to not, you know, get my leg ripped off. And it's like, and afterwards, it's like what Sarah was saying, like, you know, if she's out there designing stuff or working, like that little bit of a mental and physical break, like burning that off, like, okay, now I can face my problems.
But
like,
I don't think it's just that you don't think about it. I think that in jiu-jitsu, and especially if you've been doing it for a long enough time, like you're going, they're little battles every single time that you're in the gym. So every time I roll, well, they're not little battles when I roll with you guys. They're epic battles for me of survival.
You get into epic battles. I see you roll.
But it's, I feel like with every single time we are put under that pressure, it makes the pressures of life seem, I don't want to say easier, but I feel like we have more patience for things. And sometimes when I haven't been on the mat for a few days or whatever, and I'm in that very like anxious zone that I'm feeling, that it just takes one class. And we leave the gym and I'm like, that shit really wasn't that big of a deal.
Nope.
And I feel like I process it better. Like I process things better after, like, if we do 35 minutes of specifics and then roll 6 times too, it's like, holy shit, I just got pressed for however long, like press. And you leave the gym and you're like, cool, life is good. I'm good.
Yeah, there's a saying from like 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius said, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Like what really causes psychological suffering is honestly like not what happens to people. It's people thinking about, worrying about things they don't need to actually worry about. Like for instance, like if you ever notice like when you're worrying, like you can be in a situation that's absolutely fine. So I'm not now, but let's say here, I'm in a warm room, I got food, I got drink, I'm surrounded by good friends. Like you can have people that are worrying like crazy, but it's their thoughts are going off and creating a problem that they don't necessarily need to create. It's like most people, it's almost like, you know, like if their thoughts are voices, it's like having someone screaming at you all day long. Like, you know, when you have thoughts about anxiety and worrying about things that you often see you don't even need to worry about. Like, you know, like I said, like we suffer more from imagination and like, you know, our thoughts going off than we do like actually in reality. Like I know when I confront things I worry about, like I almost inevitably I come out thinking, wow, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
That wasn't what my mind made it. And like that's one of the huge psychological benefits of jiu-jitsu. It's a form of meditation. Like There's only the here. There's only the now. There's only me trying to submit James. I'm not worrying about work. I'm not worrying about groceries. I'm just in the moment, and it almost forces you to meditate.
That's awesome.
I've never thought about it that way. Like being like you have to be wholly present in that one moment, or you're going to sleep.
Yes, yes.
That, and I
Like
love
that. That's awesome.
I love the analogy of the stress and anxiety of voices screaming at you all day. That's great.
Yeah.
Like that's a great analogy. Like that it describes it for me personally. Like with stress that we have in our normal daily life, like I've never like been able to put it into context like that, but that's exactly what it is because I always joke around. Sarah, we'll be riding around and Sarah will say like, "What are you thinking about?" And I've always described my brain as a merry-go-round. And
It's a circus. It's not just a merry-go-round.
but like whenever I wake up, the merry-go-round's there. It's kind of moving. As things go, it picks up speed. So I've always equated that kind of thing to the merry-go-round's going 100 miles an hour and it's going so fast. She's like, "What are you thinking about?" And I can't give an answer because my thought process is flashes of photos. I don't have like thoughts. It's photo flashes of scenarios and different things, and it's like I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that, and the more I compound, the faster it goes, and the less I can focus on the problem at hand or the situation at hand. It's like I got to figure out how to slow the merry-go-round down. But the screen thing is great because I look at it as I got to stop my brain, because if I don't stop my brain, by the time I go to bed, I will not sleep. So I have to have a way to stop that. Otherwise, I can't keep up. Like, and Jiu-Jitsu does that. It's like whenever I leave Jiu-Jitsu, that bitch ain't moving. That merry-go-round, and it's funny.
Nobody's operating that button to turn it on.
Nobody's operating that button. But the second part of the question that I was going to ask is, like, we see these memes online about like white belts and blue belts leaving class, and it's like the Matthew McConaughey from the Dallas Buyers Club. He's like real skinny and he's driving, crying, and they're like blue belts leaving class. Like for me, that's me going into class. Like I'm like, the day sucks. Work was an ass, or this customer was an asshole, or whatever. And like that's me going into it, and that's me going in. And I walk in and I see you, I see Jake, or I see Saul, or I see like Shelton, or like any of these guys. Like I'm like, I have the day stress, and then I see that like you guys, and I'm like, God dang it, like, but it all goes away. And it's not even with the slap bump. It's like that first sequence.
Yeah.
That first sequence happens, and then it's like,
Yep.
that merry-go-round is stopped. But how do we get the white and blue belts to leave the gym? Because I know they're happy when they leave, you know what I mean? But that stereotype to entice new people to come into jiu-jitsu and to keep the new people in there from not leaving, like, I just got my shit pushed in for an hour and a half, and
But getting your shit pushed in for an hour and a half is part of the journey.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It has been a very large part of my journey.
Yeah, no, it just is. I think that's where the culture and the environment of the gym comes in. I think you guys do this very well. Like, like Sarah said, like it's a rough journey, but and another part of the psychological benefits of jiu-jitsu is you're living how humans are supposed to be living, which is part of a group, part of a tribe with the social supports. And maybe that's the biggest. There's a lot of psychological benefits to jiu-jitsu, but maybe that's the biggest. But I think that if it's an entirely different atmosphere when you're a blue belt and getting beat up and you don't feel supported by those around you, especially the upper belts. And I think it's much more manageable when there's a feeling of community, and the upper belts might beat you, but they explain to you how they beat you. And so I think that's where like the social supports from the gym and people having an attitude of wanting to help others, particularly white belts and blue belts, I think that's where that comes in.
Yeah, because how we've talked about this before, like how do you know if you're at the right gym, and clicks and things to avoid like that. Like me personally and Sarah, like I don't like cliques. I've never associated with cliques. Like she's said many times, she got along with the outcasts and the weirdos in school, and I was the outcast and weirdo in school, so it's like that's why we get along so well. But I feel like the bulk of the jiu-jitsu schools out there, and I don't want to just keep talking about like the school where we train, because I mean, as much as it is like program is to promote jiu-jitsu, I don't want to just promote just our school, because there are a lot of great schools out there. In our network we got a bunch of schools in just the Carlson Gracie network, but there's a ton of independent schools that have great environments and things like that. So a little distraction side note is, if you don't have that sense of community or bond or welcomeness when you come in, like, you may not be at the right school.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are like toxic jiu-jitsu schools. And actually I find like the more elite the jiu-jitsu school, not necessarily like the more toxic, but the more like cliquey it can kind of get. You know what I mean? Like Henzo Gracie's wonderful school, best school in the world. And I trained in Manhattan in that blue basement, and I got everything I ever wanted training-wise. But there was, more time where the top instructors would spend more time with like the really good black belts, and understandably so. It's like, these guys are going to Abu Dhabi and stuff, but and no one was mean there, but it didn't have that atmosphere that you have like at a little bit smaller of a school like we have here, where it's very welcoming.
Yeah, and you and I were just talking about this right before we started, was like, Henzo, one of the best ever. He's one of my favorites. Danaher, you put jiu-jitsu coaches up there, and he's always mentioned as like one of the best. But Danaher, I think he went to Columbia, was a professor at Columbia, but he didn't get his style, his reputation, his success in coaching by starting with world champions. Nope. He didn't get that from maybe training with them, alongside them, but not coaching them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to get that level of coaching unless you're working with somebody who just walked in off the street, who's unathletic, overweight. Like, great athletes, great coaches are developed, they hone their craft from weekend warriors, from the average student who comes in, maybe saw UFC and is like, hey, I want to do jiu-jitsu, or listen to Joe Rogan, hey, I want to do jiu-jitsu. They come in, it's members like that. It's members like that pay for the school, pay the bills, and coaches really emerge because they're working with people who don't know shit. You know what I mean? So like, you can't have cliques. I think when that happens, they forgot how they got there. Yeah. They forgot that, like, hey, I was a white belt day one day. I'm sure when Danaher started coaching, it wasn't like, hey, I'm coaching the purple belt and advanced classes. It's, hey, guy, you get to teach the white belts. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like, nobody starts out at the top. Everybody starts, and it's really sad. And I'm not saying that Danaher does this or anything. I'm just using him as an example. But like, it's sad when you see people forget that. And I've seen that personally. I've seen that myself in some schools and some coaches and other athletes. And I've visited some schools. You've been all over the world, and it's really, for me, disappointing whenever I go in and it's like, oh, you're black belt. You come over here with us, and hey, look at, and it's like, nah, I'd rather be there with those guys. You got
to remember like you said, remember where you came from.
Yeah.
And it's true. And like we were talking about, John's performance at the competition yesterday. John came in, I think mid 40s. Yeah. And he was talking to me about how he's lost 30 pounds in 6 months of training. And I remember when he first came in, and just to see like how much it's benefited him physically, socially. He's got a group of guys, you know, new friends, and then just to see him win that competition, you know, it's like people don't have to be world champions to do extraordinary thing, and just to watch him and his journey, you know, I've seen him. I was there his first day. I saw him 6 months in, and the level of progress, like I said, not only in jiu-jitsu, but just physically, like he's in so much better shape. You know, he's studied, and to see it pay off, it's like it's extraordinary. Like, you know, I see a lot of bad things in my job, and you know, you see bad things happen to people, but then, you know, I'll be at jiu-jitsu and see like so much improvement happen in someone in such a short course of time. And this is not someone who's trying to be a jiu-jitsu world champion, but it's just extraordinary nonetheless. Like it's rare that many positive things happen to one person, you know, in such a brief, like, you know, duration of time.
And, you know, John, I think, has lost like 30 or 40 pounds. And his confidence coming into the gym versus what it was like this weekend, he was nervous competing.
Sure.
I think he told me, he goes, I'm more nervous about like the in-house than he was at IBJJF.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
said, now I got all you guys watching me. IBJJF, I had one person.
Yeah.
Coach Derek was there, but now all you guys are here.
Yeah, and but like his confidence, he's lost weight. And the one thing I've noticed about him is when he first started, he had a hard time moving his body. John, if I remember correctly, you know, had an active lifestyle. I do know he's an avid hunter, outdoorsman, and all that. But if you're not doing that every day and you're kind of sedentary, like you gain weight, your mobility stops. And seeing his mobility, and that's why I think like everybody thinks like, you know, how do I get better at jiu-jitsu? Oh, do jiu-jitsu. And they always get pissed off at that answer. But it's like, you don't know how to move your body.
Right.
You're like a baby giraffe popping out trying to learn how to run. You're going to be all goofy and everything. But like doing jiu-jitsu, learning how to move your body, like, and increases, you know, flexibility, mobility, joint health, things like that. And like, then you get better at jiu-jitsu because we're showing you, I show you an arm bar, 6 months later, I show you the same arm bar, but now you've had 6 months of jiu-jitsu, and it's like, now you can move a little bit better. Now I can get my leg around the head, or I can transition from mount to whatever, you know. So like, it's not that like, oh, just they're as much as they're learning jiu-jitsu, they're learning how to move their body.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the big thing I noticed about John is like he moves his body very well now.
He does, and he's just a healthier, better person, and just to be there and watch it. And like, this is, you know, the story of John, but you see this consistently with people.
Corey and Matt Shelton lost a ton. Matt told me he's lost like 130 pounds since he started.
That's awesome.
Now he's also worked off the mat very hard and very disciplined. Him and Corey both. But jiu-jitsu, I think, has been like a catalyst to help that as well, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, John's done awesome. Who else is?
I think everyone's gotten better. It's funny watching so like the kids with like Napat and Frankie, like I noticed them, like it's awesome watching the kids and just see like the kids that are really into it or like really disciplined. Like I was watching Napat get beat yesterday, and like he's just putting everything together now. Like he's, you know, the kid's like what, 12 or 13, and he's...
No, I think Napat just turned 14.
14?
I think he said, yeah.
He loves jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
He loves it.
I'm so happy he's coming to the adult class now.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's probably gonna like, you know, just submit us all
Give
within
him
4
a year,
years.
give him a year and a half, 2 years, and he's gonna be beating us up.
Yeah, he's like one of those people you teach something to, and he picks it up, and you're like, I probably just taught him like what he's gonna beat me with. Yeah. But such as jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, but you know, going back to like the mental and the physical benefits of it. So what happens when what happens when to the mental side when you start losing weight, and especially like with jiu-jitsu, because you are learning something. What does that do for somebody? Like, and this is, you know, obviously we're skewed towards jiu-jitsu, like, but this can be taken to anything physical. When you start, like, what happens to the brain, chemistry, to the your thought process, like all of that, like when you start eating healthier, living a healthier lifestyle, getting active, start losing weight, like how does that affect the, you know, the brain, the human brain, I guess?
I know for me, like when I act in a disciplined manner and I see like my discipline transition to success, it's just very empowering. It's life affirming. It's like, the thing about success is that success compounds on success. So like, I know like I did the Marines, and from the Marines I got this crazy idea that I could be a doctor, and then, you know, that was around the same time I decided I could be a black belt. But it's like my successes were only possible because of how my past successes changed how I thought about myself and what was possible for myself. Like, you know, if you ask me in my teenage years, would I ever be, you know, like a really good athlete? I'd say no. But it was really like my own BS that I was feeding myself that was the problem, versus like something I was lacking. Something that like made an impression for me, you know, through it still makes a giant impression on me is so in the Marine Corps you do 3.5 months of boot camp. And then I was an infantryman, so you do 10 weeks at the Marine School of Infantry. It's in Camp Geiger, North Carolina. And every 2 weeks, you do this forced march that it gets progressively longer. So, you know, you're wearing like 70 pounds of gear. You got your rifle, you have a 70-pound pack. And I remember doing the first 5K after week 2, you know, and then I knew like 2 weeks later we're going to have to do a 10K. And I just remember like having the clearest thought after the 5K, like I can't do this. Like there's no way I can ever do 25K. Like after, and when I say K, it's kilometers,
Yeah.
but you know, like after the 5K, I'm like, I know what my body's capable of. I can't do that. But the Marine Corps, you know, they'll just show you that no, you actually can do it. Like the problem isn't that you can't do it, it's that you think you can't do it. And then, like, for me, that, like, opened up all these other possibilities. It's like, what else am I writing myself off and like, what other things am I telling myself I'm not capable of that I actually am capable of? And we all do this. Like, oftentimes, like, the biggest barrier in our own life is just the BS story you're telling yourself. And I still have, like, BS stories I tell myself, but I notice them and I think back to, you know, how I just worked through them. And, you know, it just made my life so much better. You know, just being exposed to things I thought I couldn't do and then doing them. So that's you know, and I think that happens in jiu-jitsu. Like people come in their first day, they don't, you know, they might roll with a purple belt and they're like, I could never beat this guy. And then through dedication and work, like one day they're beating them or beating someone of equivocal skill level. And it's just, and it's like, none of it's given to you. It's brutal work, But, you know, I always found like I can't be smarter than everyone. I can't be more athletic than everyone, but you can always outwork everyone, or at least like work extremely, extremely hard. And like that ultimately is what translates to success, I think.
Yeah, just like you said, consistency, a little bit better each day, a little bit of effort. It doesn't, you know, you come in, take a class, it doesn't mean that you're going to magically, you know, your problems are going to be solved, you're magically going to lose weight. It does require work. You know, you do have to put the work in to get better at jiu-jitsu. And I think when you're putting in the work to get better at jiu-jitsu, the benefits come down. You know what I mean? Because if you're focused every day on like, oh my God, what did I eat? You know what I mean? But if you just a little bit, like you make that small choices every day, like, do I really need this Snicker? No, I don't. Let's put that back. So today I cut one Snickers out. You know, tomorrow it's like, man, I really want ice cream. And
Don't sit here and say you're going to say no to ice
I
cream.
know I typically don't say no to ice cream, but like you put that away. So those are small victories. Like those add up, like you said, over a year. Skipping one Snickers a day will be, over a year could be 20 pounds that you could lose. And then just like getting jiu-jitsu, like you get a little bit better every day. Even though white belts don't see it, us on the outside that have been doing it a while, we see it every day. It's like, oh man, this, I roll with him. He's getting tougher. Like he defended my first attack. Now to get him with my second. Then it's like, oh, he's defending my second attack. Now I have to transition to positions to get a finish. And it's like, so we see that on the outside, and white belts, they don't see that. And they're like, oh, I suck or whatever, and it's like, and I think we do a good job of encouragement. You know what I mean? And
You do. We do. And that's, yeah, I agree with all that. And the previous question of how you can help the white and blue belts, it's just that. It's pointing out their progress. It's encouraging them.
Yeah, because we don't want them driving home crying.
No, we don't want
going,
that.
What just happened? Now, we want them going home like going, what just happened to me? Because that is pretty cool. And you're like, you blow someone's mind and they're like, I never saw that coming. What the hell was that? That is kind of cool, But like,
yeah.
But yeah, you don't want them going like home stressed out. Like you want them going home like, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I've always wondered, because like what really hooked me to jiu-jitsu was as a white belt, like, having some wrestling experience, going against a purple belt who just like destroyed me. And it's like some people have the reaction of like, I don't ever want to do that again. But to me, it was kind of like, man, that was cool. Like it was brutal, but that was cool. And like sometimes I think with the white belts, obviously not hurting them, but like going hard, but like showing them what can be done with jiu-jitsu can help them because it can motivate them. But not everyone responds to that. Like you gotta, you gotta be kind of careful who you do that to. But some white belts, when like I turn up the RPMs, like really like it. Because I'm not hurting them, but I'm just showing like I'll transition from this submission to this submission, like. This is what can happen when your jiu-jitsu gets good.
Yeah.
And I do think it starts to make a little bit of sense, because I know for me, and we've talked about this before, when I was a white belt, it was like the first time that I actually finished, like I actually hit a submission, the first time I was like, I did it.
Yeah.
Like I was like that 2-year-old who like drew something and was like, I did it. I was like, you had that like feeling of, holy shit, I think I might like know this stuff.
Yeah.
And then you quickly get submitted 16 times after that, but you had that one moment that it like made sense in your brain and you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And so then I think it like makes it even more exciting to keep coming back, because you get smashed and smashed and smashed for so long and you're learning stuff, you're learning how to move or just survive or whatever. But then whenever you actually throw that first submission that works that first time, you're like, oh, jiu-jitsu is cool. Like it was cool before, but it's cool now.
My favorite promotion I ever got was first stripe on my white belt. Nothing ever felt as good, including a black belt. The first stripe on the white belt was like, oh my God, I may be able to do this.
Oh man, if they would have had Instagram back then, I probably would have been like this.
Yeah. No,
Yeah. I at the in-house, one of the kids, teenager, asked me like, he's like, what's it like being a black belt? And I was like, it's worse than being a white belt.
Yeah.
And he's like, I think it kind of threw him off a little bit. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, because of guys like you. And again, he was like confused. I'm like, you guys think we know everything. We don't know everything. All that belt means is like, I've just stuck around a long time, like, and I have a good grasp of fundamentals of jiu-jitsu, but like, it doesn't mean that like I know everything. You're never gonna go know everything. And as a black belt, if you think you know everything, you're full of shit. Like, you can learn something from white belts, blue belts. You can learn something from anybody.
Well, and the game's evolving.
Yeah,
like,
and that's the
day.
great thing about jiu-jitsu. And it's like, and I said I would rather, like, looking back, I had more fun when I didn't know shit, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
It's when I roll with guys, like you or other advanced guys, and it's like I know what I should be doing, and I'm not doing it, that's whenever I get stressed out. I'm like, God damn it.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe I fell for that trap, you know? And it's like, you know, you were rolling or whatever, and I try something and it fails. It's like in my head, I go, I know better. And now he's going to do this. And there's my ankle in about 3, 2, yep. Tap it. You know what I mean? Yep. So it's like the black belt part is bad because you know better, and you know it's like, oh, it gets that part's frustrating. The white belt, you don't know. You're like, what was that?
Right.
You're like, hey man, that was, you know, Ezekiel choke or something. You know, it's like, you know, that part's cool because you don't know. Like, it's the great unknown. But when you know and you still can't stop it or you can't prevent it, that's the frustrating part, is like, oh, well, here it comes.
Well, that's like Jay, you know, like, you know, I'm always like, well, I don't say this, but like, it's like, okay, talk posture to me. I know posture, blah, blah, blah. Then I roll with Jake, and, you know, I'm in his guard, and he's got my posture completely broken, and it's like, how did this happen? Like,
how did I get here?
What? Like,
what life choices did I make to end up right here, right now?
yeah. Like I'm always preaching to the white belts, posture, you know, and then like, you roll with someone like Jake who just completely breaks down your posture, and it's like something that's emphasized since day one. And it's like, man, okay, got to think more about posture.
Yeah, that sucks. And then, you know, sometimes it is overlooked that, you know, you do need upper belts to progress, you know, to guide, coach, bounce ideas off of. And that's one of the things I love, you know, drilling with you and some of the other guys, is like, it's not that I need to drill, which drilling is great, but sometimes I need to understand, like, why. You know what I mean? Like, hey, like we were doing something like a snap down head and arm thing, and like, well, why would we do, like, I need to understand why. I've done this drill 1,000 times, but I've never actually stopped and been like, well, why are we, you know, we talked about that on the mat. And, you know, then you need that, but then you also need a room full of white and blue belts to practice it on. And I know a friend of mine, Paul, I think I talked about it before, like, he's won worlds, you know, his coach, Danny and Daniel, they're great coaches, but his schedule, he didn't always get to work with them. And he worked with white and blue belts and a lot of situationals. And, you know, you get 10 solid blue belts and a couple of white belts, they're going to gash you. They're going to tire you. They're going to force the technique out of you. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that, you know, Hodger Gracie, like, he trained with his students. He would do like camps. He'd visit Henzo's place, I heard, time to time, but it's not like he brought in, when he was on his tear of winning worlds and winning everything else, like, he was training with his students.
Yeah. I think I had that conversation, I think it was with Derek, but it's like, you don't need to train with world-class people necessarily to become world-class. Like,
no.
And like we're talking about, like, I get tested plenty, you know, and I've been a black belt for 4 years, and I get tested plenty rolling with the blue and the purple belts and even the white belts. Like I said, like, I'm leaving every class exhausted.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, am I tapping them out? Yes. Is it easy? No.
Yeah.
It's still that. I don't think it'll ever be easy.
No. I don't think so. But they are important. Like, gyms financially, the business, the coaching, development of coaches, development of athletes are all dependent on white belts.
Absolutely.
Well, if there are no white belts, then there's nobody new coming into your gym. And so what are you doing that's creating an atmosphere that's not welcoming to people coming in? You know? So either that, or they're coming in and then they're peacing out real fast, because that's not where they should be. But it goes back to you saying, like, how do you know you're at the right gym? So if there's not a good mix of people, you know, of all skill levels, then, I mean, you may not be in the right place. If it's all upper belts and no lower belts, well, it's maybe not a welcoming environment for new people. And if it's all lower belts and no higher belts,
maybe the instruction's not there.
Maybe something else is going on. But I don't know. I'm like you said before, like, we do a lot of praising our own gym, but we like the atmosphere and the family that's created there. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's something to know, like, if you're in a good gym. I think until you've been in a lot of gyms, like, I know, like, now I'm way better at assessing, like, what is a good gym and what's not, because I've been to good gyms and I've been to bad gyms. So yeah, it might be tough for white belts to know. Like, there's definitely like warning signs, I think so.
Yeah.
You know, which of toxic gyms. But yeah, it's I don't know. Like, I think you just, like, I know at our gym, like, you just get a feeling that it's just a good place. Like, there's not yelling, there's not shaming. You know, it's just people are generally nice, and they're also very good. You know, we did the open mat competition, or excuse me, we just did the Carlson Gracie competition. You know, you're not being charged $100 to compete at your own in-house competition. You know, people aren't trying to take advantage of you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be tough. There can be like this cultish element almost to jiu-jitsu too, where like.
I was in a CrossFit cult, so I know exactly what that looks like.
Have you been to like gyms where like the instructors, like you have to address them or a certain way?
Master, sensei, professor, you know.
Yeah, and that to me always is like, not necessarily like I won't train there, but like a warning sign. And, you know, the other side of it is like, you know, people who dedicate their life to teaching jiu-jitsu deserve respect, especially on the jiu-jitsu mat. So it's not so clear, but yeah, there can be warning signs. Like,
well, because that can be a little cringy. I think it's a difference between like, because I haven't and always will, and I heard them snicker at me yesterday, even though I wasn't competing, but it doesn't matter whose mat it is and what I'm doing on the mat. I can be in regular clothes, you know, I bow on and off the mat. You know what I mean?
Right.
It is, you're showing respect, you greet the instructor. It was Tiago's gym. The moment I get there, he's the first person I speak to. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a difference between like there being the culture of jiu-jitsu and then there being like some cringiness with some power trips that happens whenever but I mean, I love the traditional, like the culture of jiu-jitsu regarding the respect of showing it between, you know, practitioners or whatever, and also with your instructors and coaches.
Yeah, the etiquette.
Yeah, etiquette. Good word. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, that's across martial arts, like bowing on and off the mat, bowing to your sensei, your coach, whatever you want to call them. But it's how they impose that. If they're up leaning over you, like, you know, I'm over
You must bow.
Yeah, bow to your sensei.
Right.
Rex Kwando.
Yeah, right.
But like if you're if you know, those are great warning signs, like the too many white belts, no white belts, things like that, you know. Very cliquey. I was at a gym where only black belts rolled together first, and if there was time, they might sprinkle down and roll with some of the lower belts. And there was this massive divide between skill level, between, you know, the black belts, brown belts, and then purple, blue, and white. There was like a clear dividing line.
Which is such a disservice to your students too, though.
Yeah.
It's such a disservice. Because I mean, I'm just a lowly little purple belt, but like, there's great things about rolling with all skill levels and taking things away from everything. I have literally had to hold a white belt in place. Like, you are not going to do cartwheels all around me. You know what I mean? And learning how to control someone else's body, where being controlled by other people, like, you take stuff away from it, and then like, who's growing out of that situation? If upper belts are only going with upper belts and lower belts are only going with lower belts, who's growing?
Right.
You know?
Right. I think it just all comes down to respect. Like, so I've been at seminars, very famous jiu-jitsu people, won't say their name, but, you know, I was trying to do a technique and doing it wrong, and famous jiu-jitsu person said, you know, what the fuck, man? Like, what are you doing? And it's, you can be a white belt, you can be a blue belt, but no one in the world has the right to make you feel lesser or disrespect you. And the same is true, you know, when a white belt talks to a black belt. Like, you know, like, I don't have a problem with people asking me to roll, but if it's like, hey man, come roll, it's like, it's like
Easy there, big
tact.
guy.
There's way to say things.
Yeah,
you know?
there's definitely etiquette. Like, some places don't like it when lower belts ask upper belts to roll and different things like that. If I'm rolling, I'm rolling. I'll sit in the middle of the mat, and whoever comes up.
You like raise your hand.
I do.
You're like,
I'll
like
sit
this.
in the middle of the
You're
mat,
like,
and I look down. I look down, and I'm just like, come on.
Whoever shows up,
Whoever shows up. You know what I mean? But I was having this conversation. I'm curious your thought. I was talking to Blake after a 6 a.m. class, and we were talking about somebody getting good, and he's like, man, I got to step my game up. And I'm like, no, it's not that you got to step your game up. One, you think about the learning curve from day one to a year, like how much they're learning. But then you think about what you learn from year 1 to year 2, that gap, that learning starts going down. And then year 2 to year 3, and then it's year 6, it's like, I'm just getting better at what I'm learning, but I'm actually like not learning. You have the foundation, you have the fundamentals. And I was explaining to him, like, that's where belts come in, and that's where belts don't matter. Like, because we can roll together. My training partners are white to black belts. And if I roll with somebody long enough, we're going to figure each other's game out.
Right.
You're going to get better. And it's like, Blake was like, man, I roll with you and I do well. Then I roll with this guy and I get smashed. And it's like, well, you don't know his game.
Right.
He's young, athletic. You and I roll together. And there's times where it's like, you give me fits. Blake's blue belt for a couple years. He'll give me fits. He's tough, man.
He's tough.
And it's like, I may have to pull out some tricks that I haven't, had to pull out in a long time. And it's not that my skill level is less or his is some great blue belt. It's just we're training together so much that I'm helping him get better. He's helping me get better. But his learning curve is going to be more than mine to increase my ability to submit him more often. If anything, my ability to submit him should be going down because I should be helping him,
Yeah, so you're describing like kind of diminishing returns, and I've had that. And so what was interesting to me about like 9 or 10 years into jiu-jitsu, I got really into striking, and I had never been that comfortable wrestling, but when I went from doing Muay Thai where people are kicking you in the face to wrestling where it's okay, we're on our feet, but he's not gonna like kick me in the face. So, my thing with wrestling, and I think this is most people's things with wrestling, is it is intimidating in that it's intense, it's exhausting. But when I started doing something that was maybe less exhausting, but even more intense, Muay Thai, I then fell back on the wrestling. I was like, oh, this doesn't seem so bad. No. But I found that I made my game much more wrestling heavy when it was stagnating, and that's how I broke out of that. Was not really changing things, but kind of changing how my game is. Like now my game is kind of very wrestling heavy, but it wasn't always. But one of the reasons I made it wrestling is A, wrestling works, but B, it was like I did find myself just doing the same things over and over, and it's like, okay, why don't we learn like really how to wrestle?
Yeah.
So like adding something to your game or incorporating things from different styles.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was telling Blake, for us that train together all the time, all the belt means is I've been here longer.
Yeah.
That's it, and so don't get upset when you have a hard time with a white belt who's been training a year and you're a blue belt. Like, it should be hard.
Right.
Like, that should be hard, but like what I do whenever I get stuck is like I'll play games with myself. I'll say like, okay, I'm only going for 1 of 3 submissions, and they're drastically different because I've played this game before to where it's like, okay, like the pillars, like armbar, omoplata, triangle. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go for an armbar, but if I don't get that, I'm gonna get one of these 3. Well, yeah, you're gonna get one of those 3 because you're chaining a submission together.
Right.
But like, it's like, okay, I'm gonna get like an armbar from whatever, and if I don't get that, then my only other submission is a rear naked choke, and if that one doesn't work, then it's like a foot lock. So it's like forcing me to go all different parts of the body, and it's challenging me to move, because if I'm focusing on a submission that requires me on my back, them in my guard, that's where I'm going to stay, and I'm not going to move. I'm not going to get out of my rut. So it's like I'll say, okay, I'm going for crossbody straight arm locks. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to the back for rear naked. And if that doesn't work, I got to get to the foot.
Right.
You know, so it forces me to move and gets me out of my normal series that I tend to do a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and a perfect example of that, I think, is Jake. So Jake, you know, very just a student of the game, picks up things differently, or picks up things like very fast. But you know, when I came, he's mostly playing guard, but then all of a sudden he's leg locking. Then all of a sudden he's wrestling. Like, he's comfortable going in, you know, getting out of his, you know, area of expertise and trying new things. And that expands his game and also makes him learn faster.
Yeah.
He's just like a more complex Swiss Army knife. But that's part of what he's doing, is he doesn't get funneled into one type of style. Like, he sees something works and he learns about it and he tries it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to do that from time to time because I definitely get in ruts in Groundhog's Day. You know what I mean? When you roll, it's like, okay, I'm rolling with, you know, so-and-so, so I know the round is going to be, they're going to step in, they're going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I do find myself, like, if I'm rolling with that person, that they tend to do the same thing. It's like, okay, I know they're going to come in, but I'm going to do something so far out of left field. Like, I'm going to give them my back right away. And it's like, I don't like, unless we're doing specifics and it's like, hey, we're focusing on specifics. I don't like saying like, okay, start and side mount. Or now if I just murdered somebody and it's like, okay, come on, man. Like, but in general, like I'll, if I'm in a rut or I know a person only has one or two things, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and give you those, or I'm gonna put in a spot to where you can't do those, and then let's, like, in my brain, I'm not saying it out loud, but I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna work from this exchange, you know. So you kind of, first 30 seconds is steering that person, you know, and then being like, okay, here we go, now we get to work.
Yeah, and it's like someone like Blake, you know, he's a good blue belt, you know, technically we're on a different level, but it's like, if I want to practice, like, you know, cardio, like, I'll go with Blake, and like, I'll come out of rolling with Blake like, oh my God, holy shit, like, I need like 10 minutes off. Like, Blake is a gamer. So yeah, like, everyone brings something to the table.
Yep.
You know, even people that aren't very advanced. It's like, Blake challenges me. He's just a tough dude. Like, he's got cardio for days, and you know, like you said, learn from everyone. You know, and be changing your game. Like, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. Like, if you just do what you've always done, you're gonna get what you've always got. You gotta change things up.
Yeah, for sure. And I do have notes and stuff I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
So one of the things that, you know, to transition from that is the self-defense aspect of jiu-jitsu. And there's a clear divide between self-defense and sport. About 95% of jiu-jitsu practitioners practice the sport of jiu-jitsu. Unless someone's training for MMA. There are some schools that have combatives and self-defense programs. I know my buddy Danny in Panama, he actually will set 1 week every so often, and I'll see him posted. It's like, it's self-defense week. We are only doing self-defense, and I think it's good.
Yeah,
you know, because we do need the reminder of, you know, it is a martial art. It is for self-defense. And while if someone puts their hands on me, I know what to do.
Sure.
Like, the self-defense aspect of it in like a school that primarily only focuses on the sport of it, doesn't mean that they're still not teaching you a self-defense.
Yes. Exactly.
So, like, my thought, and this is what I wanted to ask you, is like, one, jiu-jitsu, because it is one of the few martial arts that you can go full speed, you can spar, as they call it, 100% without risk of injury, and you can do it multiple rounds. You know, you can roll 10 rounds if you're in shape. You can't box or kickbox 10 rounds every single day and be functional.
No, absolutely not. So I've actually been in a lot of altercations because of my job, like working on the psych ward. People on psych wards get attacked all the time, and I've used jiu-jitsu pretty successfully. The caveat is, so I don't see jiu-jitsu and wrestling as different. I just see them as grappling.
Yes.
I find much of the self-defense value of jiu-jitsu comes from wrestling. And like if you can just double leg a person, or I've gotten people in like standing arm triangle positions, which is kind of jiu-jitsu, kind of wrestling. So I will say, like, if I was training jiu-jitsu more for self-defense, I'd probably more emphasize wrestling, because it's a ground fighting, sport or martial art. You have to be able to take someone to the ground. And, I preach this, but I'm someone who struggled with this for a long time. Like, I was not a good wrestler for a long, long time until I really, really practiced it. Another thing with jiu-jitsu and self-defense is when I use jiu-jitsu and self-defense situations, I use different positions and I use different locks. Like, so for a very valuable position in self-defense, I find is knee on belly, because they can't really hit you and you can still control them, but you're at a point where they can't hit you, and also they can't bite you. And I found one of the huge things in self-defense is biting. You don't think about it
Till you work in a psych ward.
I learned that at the fire department.
If someone bites you, it's a different thing. And I've never gotten bit. I've seen security guards getting bit. There's nothing pretty about it. Like, you hear them scream primally, and it's really bad. And you do have to have awareness of where your arms are, and but I think jiu-jitsu does good for self-defense. But another thing is an understanding of striking and an understanding of distance in striking. Like the Gracies teach the red, green, red, where you can be too far for someone to hit you, and then there's a range where they can hit you, and then you can get so close they can't hit you. Like, whenever I'm in a self-defense situation, I'm thinking, like, how do I just close that gap? Like, get through that red zone to where, like, I know where if I grab most people, like, I can control them. But I know I can get knocked out like anyone else. And
anybody can be knocked out.
Anyone can be knocked out. And, also things from striking, like circling away from the right hand. In 19 out of 20 fights, it starts with a big right hand. That's probably what's coming. So I think, like, jiu-jitsu, for self-defense, there's a few things you got to know. And also, like, wrestling, to me, like, if I was to teach jiu-jitsu as a self-defense art, I would heavily emphasize wrestling.
Yeah. And I think, and it's different for me, because whenever I started, karate, boxing, Muay Thai, then, MMA and things like that. So the first thing I noticed, one, is like, everything slows down. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where jiu-jitsu will stick to jiu-jitsu, or wrestling, or, because I agree, it's grappling. Mm-hmm. It's grappling. Like, I've noticed when it slows down, I don't get that adrenaline dump to where you lose your peripheral vision, your tongue swells. Like, all of that happens whenever you get in a fight and you've never been in that situation before. You get tunnel vision, your tongue swells, you can't breathe. Right. Like, all that goes away, because it's like, if it's, in a situation to where there's no weapons involved, it's just mano y mano or whatever, and you're there, like, all that slows down. Mm-hmm. You understand, even if you've never done a lot of striking, but you've worked grip fighting on your feet, you've worked takedowns, you understand people are coming at you, you understand angles, you understand, like, okay, if this person's coming at me, like, if I turn the corner, I can take them down, I can wrestle them to the ground and hold them. Like, that confidence goes up for those stressful situations, and you're like, life's easy, because it's like, what's the worst he's going to do? You know what I mean? Right.
A caveat to that is, like, so I was in a situation a few days ago where I entered an Uber, and then some guy's like, hey, just pay me with cash or whatever, and was trying to get me into, like, this shady kind of, I don't know, I think he wanted to take the money and not get any of it to Uber. And I'm like, okay, well, what the heck happened to my ride? And then he's like, get the fuck out of my car before I shoot you. Like, he said that. And then I'm like, okay, I don't know who this person is. I bet you it's a person who has nothing to lose, who are the most dangerous type of people. And could I beat him up? Yeah, or probably. But could the situation go really badly for me where this person might stab me, this person might stab me, this person might shoot me. I might end up hurting that person and in legal trouble. Like, there's very, very few situations where I'll actually use martial arts outside a gym. Like, it's just almost always a lose-lose situation. Like, you lose if you win. A lot of times that person could sue you. Yeah, you can get an assault charge, you know. I mean, you have the right to defend yourself, depends on the situation. And you lose if they win. Like, and the more I know about people and how pathological people can be, and like I said, there's people out there just who are violent people who have nothing to lose. And you might be tougher than them, but they might be crazier, and they'll be willing to do something to you that you wouldn't do to them. And there's a lot of people out there like that. So whenever I'm in a situation, I just remove myself, like, 'cause there's just no winning.
Yeah, crazy trumps tough.
Yes.
Well, and you used to say it quite frequently because we had a friend who he'd have a couple drinks and he'd be a little squirrely, a little mouthy. And it was almost like he wanted to pick fights with people. And
This is years back also.
like a while, like a long time, not a long time ago, but
Yeah.
years back. And you know, you'd hear people like trying to calm him down. He's like, whatever, James is here. And James is like, nah, bro. Like, who I am in the gym as an MMA coach and, you know, do jiu-jitsu, like, that, I don't bring that world out here. Like, this is not.
Real life is different.
That
from the
it's
gym.
different. Like,
Yes.
are there aspects of what we do on the mat that can definitely, like, help us out in the real world? 100%. But we're also in a controlled environment where we know everything that other person has
Right.
on their person. You know, outside of the gym, you don't know what anybody is hiding anywhere. And it's like, no, I don't care how good of a right hand you have. I don't care how good of a takedown you have. I don't care that you can, whatever it is that you can do. Nothing is going to trump that person who is faster to draw a gun on you than however fast you can take them down. Like,
Yep.
it's not going to happen.
And they might not even draw a gun on you in
bottle.
front of you. They might wait till you're walking into your house and draw a gun on you.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like,
Yeah.
I never underestimate what people are capable
Yes.
of, because I've seen it, and it's, and like I said before, like, you know, someone who has nothing to lose, who doesn't care if they go to jail, they don't care if they get hurt, like, there's just some dangerous people.
Yeah.
And they get filtered out of jiu-jitsu gyms generally.
Yeah.
And those aren't the people who tend to go far in jiu-jitsu. Like, generally the people who go far in jiu-jitsu are not pathological, like, aggressive people. There's some, that's
there's
not
some.
always true.
Yeah.
But generally true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we talked about it earlier, actually. Like, I don't remember if it was earlier today, but we were talking about, like, how different everybody on the mat can be, but how, like, there is some level of like-mindedness.
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to check your ego. You do develop I have developed an incredible amount of patience because of what you go through in the beginning of your journey. Because if you're not willing to be that person who is constantly being knocked down and looking for, like, you have to conjure up that, like, all right, I'm going to go back in there today and
Right.
see if I can do a little bit more.
Well-
and the people who are very, like, all about themselves and I'm going to be, they typically don't last very long, or they get their blue belt and we never see them again.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Well-
There's a lot to that.
Well, I also like what I've found in the few situations I've been in, where it's like you're like, whatever, man, just like you said, remove yourself from the situation, ignore it, de-escalate it. You know what, man, you're right. I'm sorry, my fault. Let me buy you a beer. Like, it's on me. You know what I mean? Like, and then I've had people, one particular person that she's talking about is like, man, you could have fucked that guy. Why didn't you just beat that guy's ass? And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
I know I could beat his ass.
Right.
He doesn't. Like, and I think that's a great thing about martial arts, but jiu-jitsu is like, karate, you don't really know, like, if it's gonna work. Jiu-jitsu, you know if it's gonna work or not. Like, and so I know if somebody doesn't know something, no matter how big they are, unless they knock me out, which that could happen. But if I get my hands on them,
Yeah.
I know the end result. You know what I mean? And that, I think, humility, that ego, like, I know what I am as a man. Like, and if you've never been tested and that situation happens, you're like, I got to prove myself. I've got to stand up and show that I'm tough and I can fight. To whereas, like, if I fight every day, 5 to 10 times a day in a class, like, dude, I don't have time for you. Like, leave me alone. Like, listen, you want to fight, you got to schedule it because I'm way exhausted.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? It's like, you don't, you know what you can do, so your ego doesn't, I don't care. I don't need to, somebody say like, oh man, you gonna let that guy talk to you? Yeah, who cares?
Right.
Like,
But like you said, we test ourselves every single day. Like you're getting that play, but you're also getting that like physical test, that physical challenge every single day, where it's like you don't need that. You don't need that to feel like you're more of a person or more of a man, more of a, whatever it is.
yeah.
Because that part of you is being, I guess, rewarded, kind of like how you're saying, or you get that daily, so you don't need that.
There's a saying, don't wrestle with a pig. You'll both get covered in shit, but the pig will enjoy it.
That's a good one.
And the other thing, like with the Uber driver, I was thinking, like, he acts like that he's going to meet the wrong person. And the wrong person isn't me. The wrong person is another crazy person with a knife.
Another one of him.
That doesn't have anything to lose.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, that's funny.
There's a sense of
the
justice.
pig's gonna enjoy.
Yeah. It's like, okay, you go back to your life, I'll go back to mine, whatever.
Yeah, and there again, like, you deal with the pressure and stress of jiu-jitsu. Situations like that are no factor. They're like, whatever. Yeah. Like, it's whatever. It makes a work meeting stress nothing. It's like, they're not going to choke me. It's not like I'm rolling with Andrew and I'm feeling that pressure that Andrew gives, or Hoffa or somebody, you know what I mean? It's like, dude, these guys got nothing, always going to say some words.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it might pick up some speed in the merry-go-round, but I know once I go to jiu-jitsu, it's going to be gone, So I think that's any exercise, any strenuous activity, is if you're doing that, like, it makes daily life stress. Like, I've never thought about that. It's really good, the whole, like, anxiety, muscle tension, anxiety, because when people don't have a release and they are tense, they're like just balls. We've all seen, like, those people, they're just like a little ball of nerves, and they come in. If they don't have, that's because they don't have a release. They don't have a way to burn that energy, so.
There's a great book called Tribe by the guy who wrote The Perfect Storm, Sebastian Junger. And the book's about a lot of things, but it talked about how people have lived for thousands of years. And he talks about, Native Americans and how they were on their feet and moving 7 to 8 hours a day. Like, most of your ancestors were not sitting down for 10 hours a day. You're built to move. And I feel like a German Shepherd. Like, you lock me in a house without exercise, like, I go crazy. But it's like a German Shepherd as a human. Like, we're built to move. You're not built to be sedentary. So it's not surprising that you feel uncomfortable when you don't exercise. It's not in your nature to just sit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not exercising is very harmful psychologically. I think everyone needs to do it. Some people more than others, but it's like, to me, it's like not an option. I need to exercise.
Yeah, I have to always joke around. Like, if I physically, sometimes I have to take a couple days off, just for my body. But
Because you're old.
Because I am old, and I do have a lot of injuries, but like, about day 2 or 3, it's like, man, if I don't get my hands on somebody, like, I've gotta like.
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Wake up in the morning, I gotta choke somebody today.
Yeah. But if you could give, and if you could, we'll kind of start wrapping up. But if you could give somebody advice that's thinking about starting jiu-jitsu, or they're thinking about trying it, like, what kind of advice could you give them for their first month, like what to expect physically, mentally, class-wise. Like if you're going to say, hey, this is what to expect your first month, and kind of give somebody advice.
I would say that it's going to be different than anything you've ever done. The movements are very unnatural. So like in boxing, like everyone has a kind of not a good, but like a basic idea of how to punch. Almost everything in jiu-jitsu is counterintuitive. Like you want someone off you, you generally don't push, you kind of keep your elbows close. But just expect to feel confused. And it's also, if you stick with it, it's going to be one of the best things you ever do in your life. You're going to meet some of the best people you ever do with your life. Like, I've done jiu-jitsu since I was 19. I will do jiu-jitsu until the day I die. Most people I know that have done jiu-jitsu love it. And it might not be for everyone, but like the benefits, the potential benefits versus like the risks, like the benefits just so outweigh it. And it just gives people so much of what they need in life. They need social connection. They need exercise. Many people need something like, like I've always liked chess and puzzles. Like, it gives me something kind of cognitively to think through too. It kind of like fulfills that part of my life. But it's going to be hard, but anything worth doing in life is worth hard. So just, it sounds generic, but just stick with it. And, it's going to be hard. It's still going to be hard, but then it's going to get better, and then it's going to get a lot better. But even when it's a lot better and you're really good at it, it's still hard. But that's what's good about it.
Well, that's some great advice. And I appreciate your time coming on. And hopefully I won't accidentally delete this one like I did with Derek. Sorry, Derek. But again, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate the roles. And I've learned a ton from not just today, but like rolling with you in general. And then shameless plug, Jiu-Jitsu Culture is Sarah's clothing company, Jiu-Jitsu. And of course, so she made a shirt for you. And so you won't have to, Derek says you always steal his shirt.
I do.
So you don't have to.
It's a nice shirt. I would have to, he could maybe steal this from me. We'll be even. No, but
Then you'll be even.
This is a nice shirt though. It really is.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you and your time and everything, man.
I
Thank you.
appreciate you guys. They're great people,
Thank you.
great school. I'm just happy to have you guys as friends, so thank you.
All right, we'll see you Monday night on the mat.
I'll be there, bro.